Good morning, everyone. I am John Olajide, founder and CEO of Access and the 2020 DRC Board Chair. On behalf of everyone at the Dallas Regional Chamber, I want to welcome all of you to this Board of Advisors conversation with our very own Mark Cuban, presented by AT&T. And of course, thank you to our platinum sponsor for today's program, the Jim Ross Law Group, and you'll be hearing from Jim Ross later on. Many of you joined us last week for our conversation with James Huffines and Britt Ryan, the two business leaders appointed by our governor and lieutenant governor to chair task forces to guide the reopening of our Texas economy. What James and Britt had to say was very encouraging for all of us as business leaders. I know it was a really engaging conversation with them. And it also affirmed the DRC's decision 9 weeks ago to focus on two things. One, our primary focus was being a trusted voice of news and information. And then secondly, ensuring that our members' concerns were heard and shared with the right decision makers. I'm sure you all agree with me that how we do our work today is totally different from what we did a couple of months ago. But what we do at the DRC remains the same, working tirelessly to make sure that the Dallas region remains the best place in the United States to live, work, and do business, for sure. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Mark Cuban, who's doing so much for our community and our country, really, when you think about it. As owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he's also co-host of Shark Tank, which is really inspiring. Can't tell you how many episodes of that I have watched, giving opportunities to many entrepreneurs. And while he does all that, he somehow finds time to be an active member of President Trump's Great American Economic Revival industry group as well. I'm sure we all agree that he's come a long way from selling garbage bags door to door when he was 12. Mark is the quintessential American success story, and we're thrilled to have him join us today. You know, in all seriousness, though, Mark, we appreciate you taking time to be with us. We are very grateful. We know how busy you are. Steve McGaw.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark. Steve McGaw, Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Business Development at AT&T, will share a few remarks on behalf of our presenting sponsor, and then he'll introduce Mark. And then, of course, Cynthia Izaguirre, anchor at WFAA, our very own Cynthia, will moderate the discussion. Then Jim Ross, the founder and principal attorney at the Jim Ross Law Group, our platinum sponsor for today's event, will transition us from that conversation to the question and answer part of the program, which is really going to be exciting, just engaging. You can use the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. We plan to wrap up around 11:30, at which time Cynthia has generously agreed to stay on for some virtual networking. So you'll have time to interact with her. She'll take your questions and then share her perspective on what's been going on this past few months. So if your schedule allows, we'd love for you to stick around and spend some time with Cynthia. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Steve McGaw. Steve is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Business Development at AT&T. We're so grateful, so very grateful for the relationship between AT&T, the DRC, and the community. I've said this countless times that I believe AT&T is a model corporate citizen, a shining example of corporate citizenship in our community, and we are so proud to have them here. And they certainly make our region a lot stronger. Now more than ever, we're relying on fast, reliable, around-the-clock connectivity. And AT&T continues to deliver for customers, especially for first responders. I'm very well aware of all the work that they do there, and for all our businesses. We're grateful, Steve, for all your support, and we're looking forward to the conversation. And I'll turn things over to you now. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. And thanks to each of you for being here today. Boy, this is really an interesting time. And, you know, as leaders in our respective organizations, it's times like these, we're called to step up to a new level of responsibility. Responsibility to take care of our employees, our customers, and our communities. I'm sure all of us in some way have had to make changes in how we work and serve customers during this crisis. At AT&T, we've had about 130,000 people working from home over the last couple of months. We have another 90,000 employees that were deemed essential. And these are the people who are keeping our network running and keeping customers and businesses connected. We're working diligently to provide the protective gear for them and implement social distancing guidelines to keep them safe. We've also found new ways to serve our customers. Through FirstNet, we're providing advanced connectivity to the true heroes, the first responders, the healthcare providers, government agencies, and others. And as a public safety partner, it's really an honor for us to serve and support them. With many people sheltering in place, we work hard to keep people connected to news like CNN, to entertainment like HBO, and to one another. We've temporarily extended service and waived late fees for customers who have let us know that they need help as a result of the COVID disruptions. And we've helped keep kids learning during this time with the launch of a $10 million Distance Learning and Family Connections Fund. I know that across DFW, companies like all of ours, big and small, are stepping up to help others in this time of need, which is one reason I'm thrilled to be here today and to introduce a man that has set the bar high in terms of what it looks like to be a business leader during challenging times like these. I'm privileged to welcome Mark Cuban. You might have seen Mark, the owner of our Dallas Mavericks, on CNBC, Forbes, CNN, Fox News, where he shared his insights on the economic recovery. As John said, Mark also serves on President Trump's Economic Recovery Advisory Group, and he's been a great partner to us at AT&T by advising us on technology and media and business innovation. Mark cares deeply about the community. You know, the way that he and Mavericks CEO Cint Marshall have set the standard for corporate responsibility during this crisis has really been inspiring, Mark. And Cynthia Zagira is a television anchor at WFFA. Everyone knows that. A Dallas native, a proud DISD product. She's most gratified by her work with Wednesday's Child. And she says that she's honored to work with some of the country's best reporters, and I agree. Just terrific programming. Here in the Dallas region, we're delighted she's here today. So welcome, Mark and Cynthia, and over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Mark, it is great to see you. And I have to say real quickly that you and I have someone in common. Jody is my hairstylist.
Oh,
also.
No, she does a much better job on your hair. It's been a long time since I've seen Jody.
She says it's time for you to call her.
Yeah, no kidding. I need a lot of Jody time right now. I've got that quarantine hair going. And thanks to you, Steve. Let me just put in a quick thanks to Steve at AT&T. Those guys are always amazing at what they do in Dallas and have been real supportive with the Mavericks and our community initiatives. And Steve, you're a hero. So thanks for all you guys do.
Thanks very much.
Agreed. Ditto on that, Mark. And before we get to economic recovery, I want to ask how the family's doing, Tiffany and the girls. I've been watching your TikTok videos with Alexis, and I love them.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun with those. I got to tell you, the first 2 weeks, Tiff and I were in charge, and then about 15 days in, the inmates took over the asylum. And so it's been a challenge like everybody else, but we're holding on. So thanks for asking, Cynthia.
So let's talk about economic recovery. These are very challenging times, very uncertain times. How did it come about that you were appointed to the President's Economic Council on reopening the country? And true that you didn't even know you were on the council until it was announced?
Well, no, I found out beforehand that I would be on But there's just some local Dallas business people who asked me if I would do it that are connected to the president. And then, some of the folks from the White House reached out to me and asked if I would do it. And I was like, absolutely, anything I can do to help, I'm more than willing to do. And so, that's how it all got started.
You have been outspoken in recent interviews that the country is moving too fast with this reopening. How would you assess it as of today?
Well, I wouldn't say too fast. What I said was that we need to learn from our experiences, and what some things that have worked here in Dallas and across the country are pickup and delivery for restaurants and other types of companies. And I think it's worked well enough that we should extend that to every single company in the country, and make it a federal mandate, because I think we're able to open in that manner and it's been proven to be safe. Now, in terms of opening up for retail and customer facing businesses, that's a little bit more difficult because there's a lot of different safety factors involved. And while Dallas has done a lot of good things, the state of Texas has done a lot of good things, and the CDC just released some more information yesterday, there hasn't been a lot of true data that has really explained to us what the economics are for small businesses to open up with limited capacity. Because for a small business to open up and protect their employees, protect their customers, protect their stakeholders, there's a lot that goes into that, including a lot of cost. For restaurants, how do you deal with all the mandates for single use? How do you deal with air conditioning? For clothing stores, how do you deal with clothes that were tried on and not purchased? There's just a long list of things that need to take place. For PPP borrowers, it's been difficult for them to get their workers to return because some of them have gone on unemployment and are making more on unemployment. And so the bigger point is, I think we need to drill down more and talk to business owners, like I'm sure the chamber is doing, and provide that feedback to the White House. I know I've provided some, but we really haven't done any type of detail on whether it makes financial sense for those businesses to open, given the constraints we're asking them to undertake.
So speaking of the PPP program, let's talk more about your idea to give American households $1,000 every couple of weeks. Talk about that, and have you had any feedback from the White House?
You haven't had any feedback from them yet, so we'll see. I can tell when they're interested because they're really silent, but they're vocal when they're interested and they're silent when they're not. But here's what I suggest. So let's start with the beginning of PPP. The conception of the payroll protection plan was just that we wanted to keep employees employed and connected to their companies, particularly for small businesses. Because if small businesses didn't have the financial ability to retain those employees, they would go on unemployment. And particularly with the $600 stimulus for unemployment, it would be more expensive for the country and taxpayers to support people on the unemployment rolls than it would to keep them continuously employed. And so the concept of PPP was great. $250 billion, run it through banks. Let's get this money to companies as quickly as we possibly can. Unfortunately, even though the Congress approved this program the first couple of days of April, the funding didn't really come through till weeks later. And because of that delta and that delay, a lot of companies have had to lay people off. And so we've seen that with 36 million people unemployed. Who knows how many people with reduced hours, reduced pay, so that number could be above 50 million. It's just crazily bad. And so because of that delay, now businesses are finding themselves in a catch-22. On one hand, they're just now starting to get money from PPP. Part two, they can't fully open in most municipalities across the country. Part three, a lot of their employees don't want to be called back to work because they'll lose all that incremental uninsurance. So the challenge with PPP is we've created this environment where employees or those who have lost their job really don't have confidence in their financial future to be able to spend money. And so because of that lack of confidence, we've seen the savings rate increase to more than it's been in over 40 years, which means money is not going into the economy. And if money is not being spent on everything from not just the essentials, utilities and broadband and rent and mortgages, but cakes, cookies, and bicycles, the non-essentials, until that money is spent, then businesses aren't going to have the demand for when they open up. And so what I suggested was to try to stimulate consumer demand, because whenever every dollar spent in a community has a multiplier of at least 1.6 and many times more. So what I suggested was we create a program that provides each household, there's 129 million households in the US, with $1,000 every 2 weeks for 2 months, with the stipulation that if you don't spend it in 10 days, you lose it. It's a use it or lose it program. And the whole concept is we need to create consumer demand during that interim period while we open up. Because if while we're opening up, there's nobody buying because they're afraid, those businesses, particularly those small to medium-sized businesses that opened up, aren't going to stay open because there's no demand for them. And so, we're not trying to pick winners and losers. We're not trying to tell people, where they should spend that $1,000, but we need to get that consumer demand going. And with the path that we're on right now, I just didn't see that happening. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No worries. So if this were COVID-19 recovery plan, how would you have done things differently?
If I would, it's easy to second guess, so I don't want to throw anybody in the bus. The one thing for certain, when you make decisions with imperfect information, you make imperfect decisions. And so there's would I have done some things differently? The only thing I would have focused on differently is that speed of getting money into the hands of businesses so that they can keep their employees connected. I had suggested an overdraft plan that didn't require an application process with banks, that the Fed would just tell the Federal Reserve would just tell banks to pay overdrafts for small and medium-sized businesses, effectively PPP qualifying businesses, and cover those overdrafts and then make the banks whole. And at the end of 30 days, we would evaluate what would be forgiven. There were a lot of banks that liked it. There were some that didn't. I actually talked to Mnuchin about it. They weren't a fan of an overdraft plan. So we are where we are. But again, I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus, because whether you're the federal government or the city of Dallas, it's really hard to make good decisions in these types of circumstances.
Phase 2 of reopening gets extended on Friday. I'm curious, how are you handling the return with yourself and your own employees?
It's difficult. It's very difficult, because on one hand, people want to go back to work. People want to get, things to return to normal as much as possible. But on the other hand, we have to be concerned with people's safety. I'm fortunate financially. I keep on asking myself, if this is my first company, when I was still living in the village with 5 roommates, what would my response be? And I'd probably be a lot more aggressive in trying to get things open. So I understand why companies really are forcing it, because that's the only way they see themselves staying in business. But at the same time, there's so many considerations. I talked about some examples of what businesses with retail-facing environments have to do to protect their customers and employees on site. But we don't even need to talk about the issues of public transportation. If you have a company like the American Airlines Center, and a lot of people take public transportation, well, you're increasing not only their risk, but you're also increasing the risk of everybody they come in contact with when you put them on public transportation. And that's not to say that DART and other organizations across the country, the public transportation organizations, aren't doing everything possible to keep everything clean, but it's just inevitable that those risk factors go up. And so in terms of what we're doing, we're trying to keep as many people as possible working from home. We're trying to find new ways to connect to our customers, communicating with them, not just doing Zoom things like this, but just connecting with them in any way possible, asking them the best way to do business with them, asking them for new ideas, because I'm a big believer that there are ways to do commerce that will be better than the way we did them before. We just have to find them. And one way to find them is to ask, your frontline employees and ask your customers how they'd like to do business and what suggestions they have. So we're trying, I guess the better way to say it is we're trying to be as innovative as possible, Cynthia, trying to find new ways to do it. And I'll add one thing, prior to the pandemic, we were on a course where digital commerce was overtaking retail commerce in a lot of environments. We've seen so many retail stores close. We've seen impacts on malls, and that was the trend that was already happening. Pandemic obviously accelerated. So now, like my wife, who would have bought produce through Amazon or have it delivered, now is doing it. And so we're seeing changes in habits. And so I'm trying to work with my companies to say, how can we create more touchless commerce situations, right? Where we can find ways for you to continue to buy with us, but we get it to you without you having to show up. Now, it's going to be tough for the Mavs. We're going to want to get people to come to a game at some point, but it's always going to have to be safety first.
You know, employment has taken a much harder hit in the United States than in other parts of the country, and in the world, I should say. Should Congress pass measures similar to those in other parts of the world to better shore up employment?
You know, it's a great question, and that's partly what the House passed recently. You know, overseas, in Europe in particular, right when this started, they did an 80% protection program in most places where they just said, look, the government's going to pay 80% of wages. The key to that working was that they did it immediately, right? The minute this hit, so that employees stayed connected to their companies. Now it's too late. You know, doing a program like that just wouldn't work. And so now that we're in the process of getting open, as I alluded to earlier, in my opinion, the stimulus that we need has to stimulate buying, because you know you're ending up with zombie companies that are being lent money to pay employees but can't really transact, you know, unless they're online. So they can't really do any face-to-face. And that really doesn't help anybody if they can't survive after the loan money runs out. So we've got to create new ways to stimulate the economy so that as businesses continue to open up, there's demand there.
One more question that I want to ask you about restrictions. When they were lifted a few weeks ago, you hired a team of secret shoppers to visit local businesses. Tell us about the idea, and did the findings surprise you at all?
Yeah, I mean, the idea was there was no real data available to me or others on exactly how businesses were responding to the openings. And so I wanted to know whether or not they were taking the precautions that were suggested and whether or not they were opening up at all. And what we found was that first weekend, only 36% of Dallas businesses with a retail facing component opened up. And that was much lower than I expected. Now, let me just add, all the data is anonymous. We're not releasing any data. It's basically been encrypted and will never be touched or provided to anybody. And we're going to do it again. I think we did it this past weekend. Not this past weekend, we'll do it again next weekend to see what the trends are, to see what percentage of businesses are now opening, to see if more are adhering to some of the sanitation and protocol recommendations, and we'll learn. You know, and that also helps me have guidance with my companies to see what's going on, and with my family, to be honest. And that's why we published it, because, you know, families want to know whether or not they can feel confident going out into the world and going into retail environments. I mean, you know, this whole thing, Cynthia, we're asking the question, who can we trust with our lives? Literally. And we're not really getting any answers from our federal government. And so because of that dearth of information, you know, it's really turned to the private sector and to communities and organizations like the Chamber to provide as much information as possible. So that's part of what I was trying to do.
Are you ready to step out yet, Mark? You, the family, are you letting your daughter step out? It's getting hard. People are going stir crazy.
Yeah, people are definitely, especially 16-year-old daughter, 13-year-old daughter, and 10-year-old son. We're letting them hang out with their friends where we know who they are. We're not letting them go out into the wild, if you will, and just go places. You know, taking walks on Katy Trail, or I've gone out there with friends and taken walks on Katy Trail, and we've gone grocery shopping still, but really haven't gone out to restaurants to eat, and haven't gone just generally shopping and trying to recreate what we did before. But we're fortunate, obviously, you know, we can buy most of the things we need online. But yeah, we're taking baby steps, and you know, I'm fine with that. But you're right, it's driving everybody crazy. Again, I mean, if going back in the day when I was living in the village, I can't even imagine what I would be doing. And, you know, when you're in your 20s, you're invincible, or at least you think you are, and you're going to make different decisions.
You're wearing your Mavs blue. Me too.
Always.
What are the chances we see basketball again in the coming weeks?
Weeks, I don't know. Months, I'm hopeful, if not confident. I think we'll play. I don't think there'll be fans there yet. But it all comes down to safety. Can we keep the players safe? Can we keep our essential personnel that would participate in putting on a game safe? And I think we'll be able to. We've just got to get everything lined up. We've seen NASCAR come back. We've seen UFC come back. We'll see some other sports start to come back. And so there's already a wide detailed discussion happening between all the sports leagues and commissions. And so I'm pretty confident we'll come back.
How does this pandemic change the NBA and professional sports moving forward?
You know, you're going to see a lot less high fives. You're going to, see guys hesitant. It's almost analogous to when Magic Johnson declared he had HIV back in 1991. There was a lot of uncertainty and lack of information and misinformed people, and people were afraid that, they didn't understand how it was transmitted, and there were people afraid to play with Magic, and he ended up retiring. And there's still a rule that was put in place back then, the infection control rule. So if anytime, an NBA player has blood on their jersey, they'll stop the game. And so I think the players will just naturally adjust in some ways. But I think, until we get fans in there, it won't be all that different. We'll experiment with the TV broadcast and find different ways to make it entertaining, because look, Mavs fans, Cowboys fans, Stars, Rangers, we all want our FC Dallas. We all want our teams back. We all want to root for teams. And so we're really going to do everything possible to get the Mavs back on the court without fans initially. And we're already planning on working on ways to get fans back into the arena.
So when we started, I told you how much I love those TikTok videos you do with Alexis. You're good, but she's better. Your daughter's got some moves. So on March 7th, though, there was an interesting little video you did with her. It was the two of you jamming to a song, and y'all were both singing, "I'm a 20 president candidate. I'm a 20 president candidate." So I'm curious, when will you announce in the future that you're running for president of the United States?
There's no announcements coming. It's just been so crazy. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always keeping my doors open, but it's highly, highly, highly unlikely. 2024, we'll see, but Alexis voted no. So
why?
A whole family voted no except me. It's a drain to put your family through, and at the age my kids are, family comes first. And there's plenty of other great candidates to pop up over the next 4 years. So we'll see what happens.
Tiffany, you think she'd support it? You mentioned maybe 2024.
Maybe, but yeah, let's just say if I would announce my candidacy when I came home, they wouldn't be there.
That's what Michelle Obama said, and then look at what happened.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you, Mark. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It's not over yet. I know that we've got a lot of really awesome people who want to ask you awesome, really smart, cool
I can't
questions.
wait for the questions.
But before we move into the question and answer, let's take a quick break to hear from our platinum sponsor, Jim Ross Law Group.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I'm really, really excited to be a part of this event today. Especially excited to be a part of this as the official law firm partner of the Dallas Mavericks. And that adds even more to what's going on here. We've partnered up with the Dallas Mavericks, but also have partnered up with the Dallas Stars, American Airlines Center, the Texas Rangers, the Dallas Wings, and Texas Live. We're not a law firm that does a bunch of TV commercials or anything like that. But recently, we've done a TV commercial wherein we wanted to thank the community, and especially the medical professionals and the emergency service workers, for all the work that they've done in risking their lives to save ours. And I reached out to our partners with the Dallas Mavericks and all the other teams, and was elated to see how fast everybody jumped on board. And a special thank you out to St. Marshall for participating in our thank you commercial. The commercial was a huge success. Everybody seemed to love it. And it was the first time that we've had all these professional sports teams actually get together in one commercial to thank the community for everything they've done. I'm a little bit of a different lawyer and a little bit of a different law firm. I'm a former Marine and Texas police officer. And before opening my own practice, I prosecuted environmental exposure cases around the country with Aaron Brockovich. So I like to go out and fight the big fight, so to speak. We have offices in Dallas and Arlington. I happen to own the Arlington's premier fine dining restaurant overlooking the entertainment district at Arlington. And we have new ventures that we're trying to get off the ground at Texas Live as well. But I'm very, very appreciative for everything that the Dallas community has done, and especially Mr. Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks. It's not often that you see people with this type of commitment to their community when he's come so far in life. And I can't tell you how appreciative we are with that. Now, before we turn it back over to Cynthia and Mr. Cuban, if y'all have questions, please don't forget, you can put your questions in the chat function at the bottom of your screen there. Cynthia will get those to Mr. Cuban. Thank you again for allowing us to participate in this incredible event. And Cynthia, back to you.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for your service to our country. Semper Fi.
Thank you, Semper Fi.
All right, Mark, we've got some great questions. Let's get to the first one here.
Wait, Cynthia, before you do
market-
that, let me just say thanks to Jim for being a great partner in all you do in the community. You guys really do excellent work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, now I'm ready.
All right, Mark. This market is difficult for savers to navigate. For us small guys, where's a good place to park your money in the current environment?
I mean, if you're a business, just park it all just in the bank right now. I don't think there's going to be any bank runs or anything like that. If you're an individual, if you have any credit card debt, I would pay it off because that's always high interest. I would make sure you have 6 to 9 months of savings for, you used to say rainy day for the next pandemic day. And then beyond that, you can start, if you really have an interest in investing in the markets, you might start just dipping your toe into a Vanguard or a low-cost mutual Standard & Poor's 500 fund and just put a little bit in every month. And that way, if it keeps on going up, you can keep on buying and you're happy. And if it goes down, you can dollar average cost lower. But just remember, there's no guarantees for anything in the market. So if you're really cautious and don't want to worry about it, just put it in the bank, pay off your credit cards.
How do you view the strategy for tackling COVID from a disease control perspective?
I'm not the scientist. All I can tell you is that, I'm a believer in American exceptionalism and even global intelligence, if you will, that we'll find a vaccine. From all the reading I've done, and again, I'm not the scientist, I really think that we'll have something in the November timeframe that gets out to those who need it most, and by January it'll be readily available. And so, that's kind of the way I'm planning out kind of into the future. But you never know for certain. And like I said earlier, the biggest challenge is we're having to figure these things out for ourselves, and there's not really anybody that we can just turn to. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx have tried, but it's just gotten so political that it's really tough to know. So I'm just, praying that we get that vaccine, before year end and that it's readily available right after.
You and me both, Mark. Okay, you said we're asking, who can we trust with our lives? What type of COVID strategy do you think is necessary to restore consumer confidence?
One, a vaccine, as I mentioned, will be the biggest thing. Two, I think we need a federal jobs program. I think with 36 million unemployed and more underemployed, we're going to have a transitional, not permanent, but transitional federal jobs program so that we can start hiring, millions of people that can do productive jobs that have a positive impact on the country. I'll start with tracking and tracing. It can't really help us with what's already taken place, but as we try to make sure that there's not a resurgence or we find hotspots, having tracking and tracing available across the country is critical. And more importantly, it should be a federal program, because what we're finding now is that cities or counties or states are trying to do their own programs. That's not really all that beneficial because there's no standards to share data. And there's no real organized analytics program to say, okay, here's where the trends are. Here are people who are moving across the country or from point A to point B and their contacts. We need to have that centralized data point. And let me just add again, because there's a lot of people concerned about their civil liberties, and rightfully so. When I talk about tracking and tracing, it's always voluntary. If for whatever reason you don't feel right about contributing your information, there's nothing the government can do to force you. Hopefully you'll feel that it's the right thing to do, but that's just the way we are in this country. You have that right to say no. But I think creating jobs for tracking and tracing, and in parallel to that, doing the same with testing. It's kind of haphazard right now and slipshod on how testing is done. Cities like Dallas have done a great job putting together programs, drive-in testing, but there's not really an organized approach across the country to create standards. We've all been pitched tests or offered tests. Hey, we've got this best test and this is the best test or that's the best test. We really don't know which ones really are the best and which ones really work. And so we need to have some standards that can be applied across the country. Again, training people to do what's necessary to become healthcare workers, hiring more of them. That hits on the unemployment and its productive job. And finally, because I can go on for days listing different things we could do as a country, I think we need to have support people for those who are vulnerable and have pre-existing conditions that can't live their lives the way they used to. And those people can not only support, those who are with compromised immunities or problems, but also the elderly, because the elderly is the fastest growing demographic in this country, and long-term care is going to be an ongoing problem. And so if we're able to create federal jobs programs so that, with millions of jobs created over the next 2 years, I think that begins to generate confidence and reduce the unemployment and really help improve the consumer side of the economy.
Speaking of setting standards, locally, you and St. Marshall have really been leaders in corporate citizenry. The Mavs have responded to the crisis by supporting essential workers, education, victims of domestic violence, food banks, hospitals, even AAC employees. Tell us about the strategy you and St. have developed, and what about the outcomes?
Yeah, the strategy has been, to try to help people that need it the most. We've supported the Family Place and other organizations because domestic violence goes up when there's, increased stress and anxiety. We've, done little things for even funeral parlor workers because they've been on, I guess you can call it the back lines, and just haven't been getting the support that they truly need. And we felt were underappreciated. Obviously, healthcare workers, law enforcement, just wherever we can try to help, that's what we've tried to do. And we've also tried to make it so that we've kind of done it on an even keel. When emergencies like this happen, a lot of people jump in early, but then they kind of trail off late as they see the impact on their own personal lives and businesses. And so we've really tried to stay consistent and continue to help. We've also tried to help small businesses. We made it so that any of our employees, when they went to eat lunch at a local business, if they turned in their receipts, we'll reimburse them. Just trying to find whatever leverageable points that we can to help. I've said it for years, for 20 years since I bought the Mavs. I don't own the Dallas Mavericks. All of North Texas does. I just write the checks. And so we're trying to give back to all of those people that have supported the Mavs over all these years.
You talked about new innovative ideas being created during periods like this. What industries or even companies do you see coming out of this much different, perhaps even stronger?
That's a great question. I'm not sure yet. And that's really where the opportunity is. I'm usually really good at coming up with ideas. This is next, this is next, this is next, but we're going through a complete restart. And so there's going to be some 16-year-old or 61-year-old whose back's against the wall, who comes up with a great idea that everybody thinks they're an idiot and crazy, and then it turns out to be game changing. And those really are the ones I'm looking to invest in. Not the next this, not the next, UV light, not the next cleaning product, more something that just changes how we approach living our lives in this new higher risk environment, or just more fun ways of doing things, better ways to have fun. And so I think there's going to be a lot of great companies that are created out of this. I wish I could tell you which ones.
There are so many metrics reported in terms of cases, deaths, infection rates, hospital numbers. Which numbers are you looking at closely, especially here in North Texas?
The ones I pay the most attention to are all the symptoms driven hospitalization. In other words, it's horrific what the mortality rate is. Anything greater than 0 is bad. But what we're really not finding out, that I'm trying to dig into, is the impairment rate. We're hearing about all these different symptoms as a result of COVID: blood clotting, kidney disease, lung dysfunction, neurological symptoms. We've had a couple of folks that work for various companies of mine that, didn't have headaches prior to catching COVID. Now they have horrific headaches. And so there's a variety of impairment issues that I'm trying to get a better handle on, because I think people are overusing the mortality rate as a guide for making decisions. Because that rate, as we test more, that rate's going to go down, and it becomes really easy to be dismissive of it. Oh, fewer people died from COVID than died from X, Y, or Z. But what we're not really aware of is how many people are impaired to the point of not being able to do their job, or having to change their life because they caught COVID. If you have, punishing headaches that you never had before, if you have lung dysfunction, so you can't walk, even though you may be testing negative now. There's so many different ways that COVID can impact those who have been affected. And so I'm trying to get a better handle on that, and it's difficult because that data is not really there, because that's what's really going to guide me in making decisions on when I think it's safe. But that data is not there yet, but that's really what I'm searching for.
Do you think struggling business models like big retail, who were struggling to begin with, will ever get back? And what advice would you give them to pivot?
Just walk into the store, department store type things. No, I don't think they're ever coming back. I think Amazon, you've seen Walmart evolve to be much more online. Target, the same thing. I think those big spots that were in strip malls or big malls, I think are going to have to evolve to be more like destinations for pop-up stores, where there's always something changing and there's always something new. So there's a reason for people to come back. I think the days of, this is what we sell, maybe there's a new season for clothing or this or that, and that being sold in a big box environment, I think those days are gone. I think where you've seen big box companies like Best Buy and others do well, it's they transition themselves more to be showrooms than anything else. And people then buy online. And, for some companies that works, they minimize their actual retail space and maximize the back of the room, the back of the box, if you will, to be warehouse space.
Do you think this pandemic will delay the retirement of more baby boomers because financial portfolios are tanking, or accelerate it?
I think it'll change it. I think because baby boomers are going to be those who are most concerned about going outdoors, going outside, going to work. And so where we'll find new ways to employ them from home, I think that they may be able to work longer, but easier jobs, that not easier intellectually, but just physically easier jobs than having to go to work somewhere. And I'll give you an example. One of the big trends is artificial intelligence. And in order for artificial intelligence to work well, the data has to go through this process called labeling. And labeling actually can be done anywhere. You know how you have those captchas when you go in to decide, they'll say how many traffic signs, how many stop signs are in this picture, or how many traffic lights are in this picture. That's a labeling process. And so doing those types of things might be mind-numbing in some respect, but there'll be jobs that I think baby boomers will be able to do well without having to leave home, because that's what we're going to need a lot more of. If people are compromised by the virus, if they have underlying conditions that make them concerned about going out, even after we have a vaccine, we're going to need to find more work from home solutions. And and that parlays right into what I was talking about new types of companies being created. And so yes, baby boomers may have to work longer, but I think they'll also be able to find jobs more and more as we go forward that allow them to work from home.
What would be the value of big infrastructure projects like high-speed rail at this time?
I think if they're for infrastructure, if it really is leverageable and creates a multiplier effect, like I think high-speed rail would be great because it'll allow people to get between Dallas and Houston and other cities much more quickly. And you've seen it work in Asia and work out very well in terms of improving productivity and reducing time traveling. If we're able to have a vaccine and people feel confident to go on there. In terms of bigger picture infrastructure, I think we really need to start looking towards the future. As much as people like to say we just have to bring everything inside the country, we still have to compete globally to be able to sell things to other countries. And one of the places we haven't performed well in is manufacturing. We've seen a lot of manufacturing go overseas. If if they put me in charge of infrastructure 2.0, what I would do is invest a lot of money into robotics. Because in my perspective, if there's $1 billion, just picking a billion products, just picking a number out of the air, made overseas, if we can invest in robotics and create manufacturing plants using robots, that brings back half of those or 500 million of them. The ecosystem built around those robotic manufacturing environments will create far more jobs than traditional old school manufacturing would have, and would allow us to sell and create. And, you know, we talk about competing with China, we talk about competing with other countries. That's not going to take looking inward and burying our head in the sand. If we want to kick China's ass, we have to invest in technology, because that's exactly what they're doing. And if they beat us in AI, and if they beat us in robotics, and if they beat us in precision medicine, whether it's China, Japan, Germany, Russia, whoever, we're not going to be the leading economy in the world any longer. So from my perspective, we, just like we invested to go to the moon, and we've invested in so many other future-looking technologies, we have to do more of that today. We've really gotten away from it, and we've got to change that immediately. Otherwise, you know, America Inc. is not going to be able to compete as well as we need to with Japan and Germany Inc. and Russia Inc. and China Inc. So yes, I like high-speed rail. I like aqueducts for transporting water, but I like investing in AI and robotics and precision medicine even more.
What do you need from DRC members as you try to accelerate progress to get to a new normal?
You know, everybody's just got to contribute what they can. You know, there's no one thing. It's just, you know, none of us can be heroes unless all of us are heroes. If we all do our own little part, you know, and help where we can, then things will work out. I don't think there's any one thing.
I'm curious, what's the biggest lesson you've learned during this pandemic?
That's a great question, Cynthia. Patience, you know, compassion. I'm not used to dealing with so much uncertainty. You know, it drives me crazy that we don't know what the best scientists are saying right now, that there's arguments over what actually is even science, you know, that things are so partisan that we're not quite sure what sources of information to trust. There's just, you know, I don't want to be political, but there's no leadership. And when you don't have leadership, you have uncertainty. And with all that uncertainty, it makes it tougher to make decisions, not only for business, but not only for cities, but for your family as well. And, you know, I just trying to just accept that that's just the way it is, and find ways to deal with it myself, and maybe contribute and just try to be supportive, even if you feel like the girl with the finger in the dike, you know, just to keep the dam from collapsing. It's just, you know, I've just tried to be patient, and that's probably the biggest takeaway from all this for me personally.
You talk about leadership, Mark. I'm one of your 7 million followers on Twitter. And recently you talked about what it takes to be a leader. Can you share that with this group?
Yeah, I mean, what I said was that being a leader means not blaming who was there before you. It means not playing the victim. It means, you know, it means giving credit to the people that do the work. It means enabling people to want to do the work. It means having a vision that aligns with the vision of the people that you lead, that it's not about you, it's about everybody else, right? You know, a great leader gets their greatest satisfaction from watching everybody around them succeed. And that's just not what we're seeing.
Final question. We're looking for stories that inspire and encourage us, ones that bring a smile to our face, a laugh, or a reminder of the good of humanity. Do you have one you can share?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, look, it's been fun. All the things around my kids, from, you know, what kids are doing with TikTok, to drive-by parades for birthdays, to making masks and PPE equipment, to just being there. You know, I love Dallas so much just because we are a community. You know, even though there's so much diversity, and we're so different in so many ways, but we're all in this together. And everybody just seems to be stepping up in just little ways. And all those little ways add up so much. And so, you know, I like to get out there and walk. And I've never walked so much in my entire life. You know, I literally, I got my step counter and everything. I mean, 9 miles, almost 10 miles. And, you know, you just get in yourself. But wherever I'm walking, everybody's just saying hi and smiling. And on their lawn in their lawn chairs, just having little parties and social distancing. I walked by and actually, hung out with this group. They were having somebody's 50th birthday party, and they were all on the front lawn, toasting each other from 6 feet away, throwing beers to each other, wiping them off. I mean, that's what Dallas is all about, and that's what this country is all about. It's all these little things that add up, and that's what makes me so hopeful.
I think I'm going to take social distancing with me. I'm not going to be shaking people's hands in the future. You're going to get a peace sign from me.
No, this is me. Like, if you get one, I like you. If you get two, we're friends. If you get three, we're close.
All right, some insight into Mark Cuban. Let's hear it from Mark. Go Mavs. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
Cynthia.
We know you're extremely busy, and that you would take time for us today means a lot.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for the questions, and thanks for hosting me. Thanks,
And
Steve.
now-
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
You're the best, Mark. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to Dale Petrosky, the president and CEO of the Dallas Regional Chamber, for some closing remarks.
Well, wow, what a program. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Cynthia. Mark, we are so lucky to have the smartest and most thoughtful NBA owner in all of the NBA. So I really, really loved what you had to say. I will say this, Mark, I miss Luka. I miss Luka big time. Cynthia, what a pro. Love watching you on Channel 8. Thank you for doing this for us. It really was just a beautifully done show today. John Olajide, we're so lucky to have you as our chair this year. You inspire us every single day with your optimism and your hope and your leadership. Thank you for all you do. Steve and AT&T, one of the great companies in America. We're so lucky to have you guys headquartered here. So great meeting you through our friend John Stevens. Jim and the Jim Ross Law Firm, one of the great business leaders in our community. We see more and more of him. He's a great DRC member. Jim, thank you for sponsoring this. Just thrilled with the way this went today. Going to talk about next week. We have one more of these next week. It's with Ray Washburn. Ray Washburn's on the White House Task Force on Economic Recovery, as well as Mark. He owns the restaurants Mi Casina. He's also in retail and real estate. He'll have a lot to say. We have a couple of sponsorships available for that. For anybody watching who would like to do what AT&T and Jim Ross Law Firm did today, we'd love to have you as well. So with that, I'm going to say I'm inspired, ready for the rest of the day. Thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you soon.